all of a sudden it was just me and the work. And I realized I'm not passionate about this at all. In fact, I actually kind of hate this. But I still remember my first call that I took with an influencer. It was a guy in the UK, 7 a.m. And so I remember chatting with him, and I was so freaking scared, dude. Like, my heart was pounding so fast.
But the day that you quit, you didn't have revenue coming in yet.
No.
You burned your boats.
No. But I believed, I burned my boats.
Welcome to Hello Grow.
The #1 growth podcast in the world.
In the whole world. We have Chris Williamson with us.
Yes. Thanks for having me,
We're
fellas.
excited.
My best mate and my cousin since birth.
Yep.
It's good to have you, bro.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Quick background on Chris. We went to school together, small little remote college in southeast Idaho. And Chris ended up getting his accounting degree, then heading off to KPMG in Salt Lake City.
Yep.
Got his Master's in Accounting from the University of Utah, and then took this leap of faith that no one in the world knew what he was doing. Like, bro, where are you going? Except I knew, because we were talking through, like, what do you actually want to do for your life? It's been fun to see the journey. And took this leap of faith, left the Big Four accounting, which is so coveted, so hard to get into, and just took this jump to social media marketing and went and worked at the space station. And after working for Space Station Integrations, did the same thing again of like, bro, you have such a good job. Think how much more you're making than you were making when you were doing the Big Four. And took another leap to go start your own agency, Legends Marketing, which is influencer marketing. You connect influencers, massive influencers that we won't mention just for their sake, but people that anyone watching this would know who you represent if we mention their names, with massive brands like Audible and tons of massive brands that you work with. Today we're going to talk through your story, some of the courage that it took to make some of these leaps, and we're also going to talk about how sales leaders and entrepreneurs can leverage influencers to grow their businesses.
Love it, dude. Sounds great.
Sweet. So to start out, let's go all the way back, dude. I want to touch on this just for a second because I would consider what you do sales heavy. Like, you were a salesperson.
Yep, pretty much.
And we've had some people on that were door-to-door salespeople. It wasn't for you. I want to go, like, we did door-to-door sales in college. That's part of what you and I got through school together.
Yep.
It was a fit for me and it wasn't a fit for you. And I think a lot of people at that stage of life would have just like put sales behind them forever. But can you talk a little bit about your experience and what the profile is of a door-to-door sales rep versus what you're doing and why you've thrived so much in what you do?
With door-to-door sales, it's very much, you got to like close on the door. You don't really have to develop too much of a relationship with the person. Where what I do now is the whole entire thing that I do is the relationship, from whether we're working with the brands, whether it's the influencer, both sides. I'm just developing a relationship, and it's more of this long-term type of sell than it is more, you're closing someone right on the door. And yeah, man, pest control is tough, dude. We were out there like 4 months, and like door to door is brutal. As soon as people would open the door, I could just feel this like, oh my gosh, like this person does not want me here. And that was really tough for me. And I also wasn't great at just like pushing through the no's. I remember going to a door with you, and I think someone said no like 7 times, and you just kept like talking about stuff, and that was really tough for me, dude. That was really
Sounds
tough
about
for me.
right.
For me, it was more so like I'd push through once, and if some guy was like, nah, man, I'm not, just be like, all right, man, well, have a good day, which from a sales side of things probably isn't the best approach, but that was more so my personality.
We had somebody on here once and we said, dude, what makes a great salesperson? It was Noah.
Yeah.
And an awful salesperson. He said, well, I think it's one of 2 things. One, they are just really, really good at like reading people and reading the room. Or 2, they are oblivious to what is going on.
Most awkward.
And I think it's almost essential to have this degree of obliviousness or not caring. That is necessary. And I see you on this ultra high, the EQ side of emotional intelligence, of being able to see the room and know, here's exactly what's happening, and I know for a fact that this person does not want me there. So how is that quality? Like, you've you have the same quality set that you had before in characteristics,
Yeah.
and you've leveraged it to be highly successful in what you're doing now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I really stumbled in to kind of what I do now. And I always felt like I was really good at talking with people and having like a connection with someone. But I didn't really know how to leverage that in the business world. Funny enough, because of summer sales, it really pushed me into accounting.
Tell me why.
I was a marketing major at BYU, Idaho. And after we did that summer of sales, I was like, dang, man, I suck at sales. Like, I'm not going to be a good salesperson, even though I thought I would be because I was good at talking to people. And so when we went back to school, I changed my major to accounting because I had taken some accounting classes. I thought they were cool. It made sense to me. And so I changed to accounting, and then I just got thrown onto this path for the Big Four. Went and did an internship at KPMG and felt like, I did a good job at that. I felt like it was pretty fun being good at Excel and learning the back end of those things. And I felt like for me, my ultimate goal was like, well, I want to be like a CFO one day or something like that. And so if I go work for the Big Four, I can grind that out for like 10 years or whatever. And I'll know the back end of like major companies, which KPMG was cool because I got to see some of these bigger companies and how stuff works there. But it wasn't exactly how I thought. I was really just focused on like tiny things. And the thing I hated about KPMG was awesome and it was a great experience, but I did not like, it felt like we were more so trying to tear down companies because that's what auditors do. You're just looking for flaws in the company, maybe where fraud could be occasionally. I felt like my personality is more towards like building something.
So tell me how are you leveraging, again, similar on that question, you're deep in on relationships, and how are you leveraging relationships? How have you leveraged relationships in your skill set there to be able to build, like, was that necessary to have that skill set, or could you have done it without?
Are you saying with like what I currently do?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you have to be like, what I do now, you have to be good at developing relationships with people because it's all about, you find an influencer and it all comes down to just, do they trust you or not, right? Like, do I trust you to go out and negotiate with these brands the same way that I would do it? And that's really what creators are thinking. And so you just have to be able to connect with them really quickly, be able to build that trust so they know that you can go out and represent them. So I'd say it's crucial to have that. Yeah.
So looking back a couple of years, you're at KPMG, Big Four, and you leave to go to work at the space station. Like, tell me your thought process.
Yeah.
What was the pushback that you were getting from people in your inner circle?
Yeah.
Who was like, walk us through that decision making.
Yeah. So at that time, I'd been working at KPMG for a year. And honestly, my favorite part about working at KPMG was we were working with like a team every day. So I had all these coworkers that I was super close with and enjoyed working with them, all that stuff. But then COVID hit, and all of a sudden it was just me at home working on audit just by myself. And all of a sudden it was just me in the work. And I realized I'm not passionate about this at all. In fact, I actually kind of hate this. Like, I'm just sitting here on Excel all day. I have no human interaction. And I know for, some people that's, maybe they prefer that. Maybe they're more introverted. I'm like fully extroverted. So it's like I thrive on being around people. Like, I get more energy the more I'm like chatting with people. And so I think at that time I was feeling like pretty depressed, dude. So I was like, I want to do something in my life that I'm passionate about. And I had no clue what that was, but I knew I needed to figure out what it was. And it was tough because obviously my dad wasn't for it at all. He's like, you've spent 5 years going to school to be an accountant. You're at KPMG. If you stay on this path, one day you could be a partner there. But the biggest thing for me is I saw the partners at KPMG and I just asked myself, like, is that the life that I want to have? And a lot of them seem super stressed out, man, like super stressed. And I don't blame them because they're signing off on documents saying like, yes, we've audited this whole company and it's good. And it's like, I don't know. They just didn't seem super happy. And maybe some of them are. But for me, I just felt like that wasn't the right path for me. So at that time, my brother-in-law, my sister-in-law, my wife's sister, we'd hang out with them a lot. And my brother-in-law and I started playing this game called Rocket League. And so I was like, maybe there's something in like esports or something I could do with that. Found out that there's this company called Space Station that's located in Utah, and I actually got recommended by a buddy who worked with me at KPMG, and so I ended up applying there to work in their gaming department because I'm like, let's just see what this is like. And I ended up getting interviewed by a different department at the space station that's called Space Station Integrations, which they do influencer marketing. And so that's how I got into influencer marketing. Also, just to preface too, my wife is an influencer, and at the time she had maybe 50,000 followers on Instagram. And so I knew a little bit about influencer, but at that point I didn't have an Instagram, nothing, dude. Like I actually hated social media. I was like, it's just a distraction. It gets me away from doing work. And so I didn't have any of that stuff. And so, that's how I ended up getting into the social media game with Space Station.
Dude, I want to hear about, so like, you don't do sales and you're like, it's not for me. You put that behind you. You go into accounting, and then you have this like existential crisis where COVID hits, you're working from home, and you're a little depressed. I think all of us were a little depressed during COVID like that. Sucked. But then you do this big 180. You say, I'm going to take a chance on something I love, and I'm going to take a chance on sales. Like, it's a sales job. You're reaching out. Can you talk about your thought process? Like, what was pulling on you internally of, like, your dad had a good point. You went to school for 5 years. You got your like, you're doing all of these things, and you're going to make this turn into something. Well, you've already tried sales. You already know you want to do accounting. How did you actually make that decision?
Well, it's funny too, because my dad all growing up said, like, if you love what you do, you never work another day in your life. Right? He'd always say that to me. And so I think at that point I was just like, I don't care if I take a pay cut. I don't care if I kind of derail my life a little bit. I'm going to go figure out what makes me like passionate. What's something like that I can be passionate about and be excited to get up and go to work every day and go do that thing. I just didn't know what that was. And I think it's tough in college because, like, once you leave high school, you go to college and you just think, like, okay, now I'm going to figure out what it is that I'm going to do. But what I do now for work, like, no college is going to be like, hey, this is the path to become an agent for influencers. Like, I didn't even know that job existed. And so, yeah, that was kind of the thought process behind it. Was just like, I want to go do something I'm passionate about. I don't care if I make less money doing it. Like, I just want to be, like, stoked waking up every morning. And so I found, Space Station and ended up working as an account manager there. And that's how I got in the influencer game and ended up loving it. It ended up just like fitting perfectly with my skill set, where it's just like, it's all about developing a relationship with someone. And I just felt like I was really good at it from the beginning.
Why do you think there isn't a clear career path for college students to go into?
Well, dude, influencer marketing is a fairly new industry. And I just think it's hard for colleges to even keep up with that. Like, there's so many new jobs that are being developed every single year, and it's tough. Yeah. I mean, for me, I was like, okay, I can either be like a dentist like my dad, or I can be a doctor, or like a policeman, or like an accountant, or a lawyer. And that's what it felt like for me. Or I can go try and be an entrepreneur and like start a business, which sounds really exciting, but if you don't know what that idea is, it's also extremely risky. So I think that's why it's tough for colleges. It's just
they move slowly. Exactly. The world's just moving much faster.
Because BYU Idaho, dude, they tried to make like a social media marketing class, and I remember taking that class actually with Jane, and she knew way more about that stuff than our teacher did, because she was doing, at that time she was really small. She maybe had 10,000 followers on Instagram, but she was like grinding really hard at just taking photos and trying to grow that,
So you get to the space station, you're, again, connecting influencers with big brands that people would know. Yeah. And that looks like, hey, we have a brand that wants you to post 3 videos or mention them this many times, and you'll get a cut. And then the space station will get a cut for brokering that relationship and being the agent of record or whatever it is in that process. Yep. So walk us through, like, you're learning something brand new for the first time. we had a guy on last time that said he didn't get a sale for 9 months. Like, was it that kind of experience for you, or you just jumped in, feet hit the ground running? And
Yeah, I actually got really lucky. I mean, obviously it's super scary when you're doing something for the first time. I got really lucky that the guy that trained me there, he was starting to phase into another part of the company. And so I got lucky that I got a couple of his influencers that I got to start working with right away. And I'm still really good friends with those guys, like, to this day. But that helped a lot. But yeah, I mean, from the beginning, there's just all this new lingo that I did not understand at all. Like, there's something called an integration. There's something called a dedicated video. Like, there's all these different things that I'm like, what the heck does this mean? And so, like, learning those things took a minute. And then once you kind of figured out, like, how to run a campaign, or like what to do when a brand comes with an offer, like how to negotiate with brands for an influencer, it probably took me like 6 months or so to really feel like I felt very confident to, like, get on calls with influencers and brands and, like, know what I was talking about. But I still remember my first call that I took with an influencer. It was a guy in the UK, and
he called you?
He called me. Well, I'd reached out to him. So I was doing outreach at the time, just, like, trying to find influencers to represent. And I hit this guy up, and he was in the UK. So he ended up calling me at like 7 a.m. And so I remember chatting with him, and I was so freaking scared, dude. Like, my heart was pounding so fast. I get on this call with him, and just like, I'd never really done anything like that before, and just kind of explained our process. But like, the sell that I'm doing for these influencers is really easy. It's like, hey man, do you want to make money? And they're just like, yes, I do want to make money. Awesome. Okay, I'm connected to this brand and this brand and this brand and this brand, and we can get you some deals. And he's like, okay. So the sell on the influencer is relatively easy, unless they have like another manager, and then it's obviously harder. The one with the brands is where it can get somewhat difficult, because you have to really start negotiating with them and know how to do it. And it can be scary sometimes, especially when you're dealing with some larger dollar amounts, because, there's a lot of different tactics you can take in negotiating. But I feel like I just kind of had to dive in and learn the hard way.
Dude, I want you to talk me through that process, because I know some of the 6-figure deals that you've closed, and they're not like this walk in the park, like, hey, do you want to do this? Yeah, you do? Okay, you're good. Like, like, you're so adroit in these conversations and know what levers to pull and strings to pull. Like, how did you get to that point?
I think a lot of it is just like knowing what you're talking about, and that's where it's really tough at the beginning. But once you get like the lingo down and everything, if you can jump on a call with an influencer and just explain to them, with some sense of knowledge of like how deals work and how the process works, it comes across as like an authority figure to some degree, where it's just like, yeah, dude, I know what I'm talking about with this stuff. I can get you deals. The industry is so new that it's just like, there's not a lot of people like that in the industry. There are a few certain groups of agencies. Obviously there's some massive ones that like represent like A-list Hollywood celebrities and stuff, and they've kind of made like departments of their agency that represent influencers. But other than that, the industry is like really scrappy for the most part. Like, there's just a lot of just different random agencies that are representing influencers. There's agencies that represent brands. And so it says like, to close like an influencer, I've found the best way to do it is just being super transparent with them. Like, I listen a lot to Alex Hormozy, and you know that. We talk about him all the time. But he always talks about give away the information, sell the implementation. And that's what I try and live by. When I get on these calls with these influencers, I'm like, dude, because like, you have to understand, a lot of these influencers, they get into the game and they're just good at making content. That's why they've exploded. They've gotten really big on YouTube. They've gotten big on Instagram, whatever, TikTok. And they've done that because they're really good at making content. Then all of a sudden they're thrown into this thing where brands are reaching out to them and then being like, hey, I'll pay you, $2K, $5K to like talk about our brand on this next post or whatever. And as a creator, that's awesome, because you're like, dude, now I'm getting paid for making this content. It's amazing. But it also is extremely overwhelming for a lot of these creators, because they're not really privy to like how to negotiate or like what their value is actually worth. Like, they're getting a ton of views. Brands are going to come in and try and lowball them right off the bat, but they don't know what their value is because they have nothing to compare it to. They're just like, oh, okay, yeah, $500 for a post. Like, let's do it. And I can't tell you how many times I've like met with an influencer where I'm like, dude, you should have been charging, 5K, 10K for this, and you're getting like $500. They just have no clue. And so if you can come in and just be just like someone trustworthy and have like show that you have integrity and just honest with them on stuff, I just found that helps them to gravitate towards you, where it's like, yeah, this guy knows what he's talking about. He's going to take care of me and not let brands take advantage of me, So anyways, hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I think you do a phenomenal job, and it's not just doing the job, but genuinely having their best interests at heart.
That's
Say,
it.
dude, I'm going to take care of you, and they know that you're going to take care of them.
That's it.
The negotiations with the brands can get fairly dicey sometimes.
Yeah, they do.
Talk to us about those.
I found out pretty early on that I need to just come out the gates with an anchor price. Also, you have to understand, most of these brands are reaching out to these influencers. Hey, we're interested in working with you. We want to sponsor you for an integration, which for people that don't know, an integration is like a 60-second segment inside of a YouTube video. So anyone who's watching a YouTube video, I'm sure you've seen with like your favorite influencer, they'll be like, hey, this video is sponsored by Audible. And then they'll go into this 60-second thing and then have a call to action at the end. If you click my link in the description below, you get X amount off for 3 free months with Audible or whatever.
This episode, by the way, is sponsored is sponsored by Legends Marketing.
Yes. Yeah. So essentially, with that, a brand's going to reach out and be like, hey, we want to work with your guy. I found pretty early on the best way to start going with these brands is just like, hey, would love to work with you guys. This would be a great fit on his channel. His rate is this much for an integration. His rate is this much for a dedicated video. Would love to work with you guys. This is our availability. We're booked up in April. Let's get something going in May. And that's just anchoring a price, right? You're just anchoring a price right away. So that way, if I'm like, hey, this influencer charges 10K, and then the brand is like, oh, okay, they got to start working off that number, right? And usually I'll pitch a little bit higher than the influencer's rate, because almost 90% of the time the brand's going to come back and like, okay, yeah, we could do, 5K on this video. It's like, all right, well, let's meet in the middle. Let's hit it 8. And then they're like, okay, let's go. So that's kind of how I've gone about with the negotiating. It's worked pretty well for me so far.
And you represent the brand or the influencer?
I represent the influencer. So
is that typical in the industry?
It is. Yeah. So you'll have 2 agencies. There's an agency that will represent solely influencers, where they manage just a bunch of different guys. Usually they'll sign with the agency. And then you have the flip side of it, where there's an agency that represents a brand. And so they're called an agency of record, and they represent a bunch of different brands. So there's a few agency of records that I'll work with because I represent influencers. And, I, to be honest, don't love dealing with agency of records. It's just a lot harder, and they're going to play hardball way more than a brand will, in my opinion. Most brands will just come in and they want to work with that influencer. You can get to a price pretty good that's fair for the influencer pretty fast. With agency of records, they're pretty cutthroat, and they'll use a lot of different tactics. Like I had one guy where we're like, hey, this is my guy's rate, and he's like, hey, that won't work for us. And I was like, okay. And then he's like, sweet, and he just ended our negotiations. He's like, yeah, we can't make that happen. And then 2 weeks later, he comes back. He's like, okay, fine, we'll work at that rate. So like his tactic was,
you just stayed silent for 2 weeks.
Yeah, man, because like
That's positioning.
yeah. So he knows that there's a lot of influencers out there that if they threaten to, so say my influencer's rate is 10K, and I'm like, hey, this my guy's rate's 10K. He's like, okay, we'll offer you 8. I was like, no, dude, like we're set at 10. I'm like, okay. And he'll walk away. He knows that a lot of influencers, if there's money on the table like that, they're like, okay, fine. Like, you know what, for an extra, 2K or whatever, like I'm only losing 2K here. Like I'll do the integration. And so that's how those agency of records will get a lot of those influencers, especially if they don't have a manager,
And where did you learn that? Did you read a book or
No.
just pure experience?
It was just from experience. I honestly should be reading some stuff on sales because mostly that's what my job's about. But listening to Alex Hormozi helps a ton. I definitely, I read $1 Million Offers from him and $1 Million Leads. Both those books are awesome. I'd recommend those 100%. And I think those helped me with positioning a little bit. But yeah.
So I want to talk about next step, dude. And I feel like I don't feel like you've given, just in our personal relationship, I don't know if you've taken a step back if you were to see yourself and be like, man, this is what this kid did and this is what he's accomplished, to give yourself the credit you deserve for what you have accomplished and the leaps that you've taken. You had this awesome job that you were making more at the space station than you were making at KPMG.
Yeah.
Which KPMG you got as a master's in accounting graduate. So you're making more, you have a good crew, and you decide to make another leap and start your own company. And I got to see front row this whole process, but can you talk through a little bit what went into it, what was in your head, and what were some of the things that were, man, I did not think it was going to be like this, that kind of caught you off guard after you made the leap?
Yeah. So when I left, there was a couple things. The first thing was I felt like there were a few things in that agency that didn't jive super well with me. I don't know if jives is the word to explain that, but for me it was tough because it was like I worked with a bunch of influencers super close, but we also represented brands. So the way Space Station set it up is they tried to be this hybrid agency where they represented influencers and they represented brands, which ultimately ended up kind of screwing over the brand and the influencer, right?
Trying to be all things for all people.
Trying to be all things for all.
No one for nobody.
Yes, exactly. And so what would happen is it's like you develop this really close relationship with an influencer and be like, dude, I'm going to get you the best rate I possibly can when I'm negotiating with brands. But now we're also representing a brand, and the brand's like, hey, I want you to get the lowest rate possible you can with each influencer. What ends up happening is you then go to your influencer like, hey, man, we got this budget from this brand. Your rate's usually $10K. Can you do it for $8? And the influencer's like, okay. And the brand, if I was solely representing the brand, I would be trying to get that guy at like $5K, right? And so ultimately, neither party really wins. It's kind of just this middle ground. And so for me, I was like, I really want to do an agency where I'm just fully representing the influencer. Like, I just want, what it comes down to is your interests have to be aligned. And the way that I've set up Legends Marketing is all the influencers that we work with, our interests are 100% aligned. And every guy that I work with knows that. And so that was a big reason for leaving Space Station, because I learned a bunch of really cool stuff there. But yeah, for me, I think I kind of just hit this point. Chris Williamson, he has the same name as me. He has this podcast called Modern Wisdom.
Oh man, I love it.
Yeah. He's awesome. He's one of the influencers that we work with. But he talks about this thing. I think it was on the Hormozy episode, but he talks about like this graph where you're basically on this graph, and say you're right here, and here's like the dot on the graph, right? Here's the line. He's like, if you go above this, you would quit your job and start something new. But he's like, most people are right here because they're just like, they're not like completely miserable. They're just happy enough. They're making just enough that they're not going to complain, or it's not enough to push them over the edge to go start something new, right? And I felt like that's where I was for a long time. I was just like right here. And then a few things happened, and it kind of pushed me to this point where I'm like, dude, I know I'm going to take this huge dip. I'm leaving this job with a great salary, but like I'm willing to risk it all for, I want to be happier, right? I want to build something great. And so that was a lot of what pushed me to make Legends Marketing. And it was one of the scariest things I've ever done, dude. Like, we closed on a house, and a week later I quit my job at Space Station.
Oh my.
And so all of a sudden I remember coming home after quitting, and I was like, sitting upstairs, and my two kids are running around. I'm up there with my wife, and I'm just like, what did I just do, man? Like, how am I going to afford this mortgage? And I probably wouldn't recommend that to everyone. It's probably not if you're closing on a home, do not quit your job the next week. I ended up working out really well. And now, definitely making way more money than I was at the Space Station. And I just feel happy every day, man. Like, I feel stoked to get up. Like, the people I work with, the influencers I work with, I chat with them on a daily basis and am able to get them really cool deals. Like, that's one thing I just love about my job is a lot of these influencers that I represent, they've become like my best friends, and I talk to them every day, and I just get to come to them like, dude, I got you this crazy deal, and we just get to celebrate together.
It's so cool. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that transition. Did you already have a business plan in place? Before you quit, did you have some customers?
Yeah, so I had one influencer. His name, well, I won't say his name here, but I had an influencer who was ready to rock with me, dude. And I essentially had this plan in mind of like, I want to build an agency that is just fully centered on influencers. It's not a hybrid. I'm not representing brands. Like, I'm just going all out on the influencer. So that was the initial thought. And then and I'd already developed all these skills of like, I knew how to do outreach, knew how to negotiate, all these things in that space. And then my next thought was, I really want to niche down. That was another issue that I felt like we had at Space Station, is we were just like, we were going to take business from anyone that we can find. We're going to represent them. We're going to do that stuff. For me, I decided, I have interest in the finance space. I really love self-development stuff, and knew a few influencers there. And it's like, I'm going to niche down and just try and capture as much of that industry as I can on YouTube. And by doing that, it ended up, I feel like we represent a good amount of the finance guys on YouTube now, which is awesome. And I think it's nice to niche down like at the beginning, because you can really, especially in what we were doing, it was like we worked with so many businesses that were in the finance. So any new finance guy we'd bring on, it'd be like, hey, we can already hook you up with this deal, this deal, this deal, this deal. And it just made it a lot easier compared to when you're so super spread out. We might have someone from, DIY, or we might have someone who makes Mr. Beast type content, and it's harder to find them a deal because we don't have those connections compared to the finance community. So yeah.
But the day that you quit, you didn't have revenue coming in yet.
No.
You burned your boats.
No. But I believed, I burned my boats, but I believed in myself, man. I knew, like, if I spend, a month, 2 months just hustling and outreaching on YouTube, like, I can find guys. Like, that's what I had done at Space Station, and I brought on a bunch of clients on there. I was like, I can do that again, and I can do it by myself. And yeah, it was freaking scary for sure, dude.
That's
it was
amazing.
freaking scary.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But ended up working out great. It also helped too. I gotta preface and just say, my wife's Instagram had really started to kind of blow up at that time, and so she was starting to generate some income as well. So, just for people listening, it wasn't as crazy as a risk. It wasn't like I was like, hey, either I find some guys in these next 2 months, or I'm like out on the street, like we're losing our house. It was more so like, my wife was very supportive and like, hey, like, I can, cover us with my revenue if you're not able to bring it in. But luckily, we were able to generate revenue within the first month, and I was already making more than I was at the Space Station in the first month, and then it just kept growing from there. So, yeah.
What emotion did you have that surprised you as soon as you were out on your own? What did you think it was going to be like, and what was it actually like?
Yeah, that's a good question, man. My original emotion was, dude, I was like really sad at first. Like, there's people there at the Space Station who I had, felt like they were my people for so long. And like those first few weeks, I mean, there was especially like a few people there that I would talk to every single day and was like building this thing with. And when I left, they felt like super betrayed, which is understandable because now we're competitors in this space. And so that sucked. And so like losing those people in my life, that really sucked. And like, that was a hard thing to get over originally. I wasn't anticipating that as much to like hurt as much as it did. I think, loneliness right off the bat. You just feel like you're all by yourself, man. And I think that's kind of a trap for entrepreneurs, where they're just like, I need to get other people involved in this with me, or I need to bring on a partner 50-50 and do stuff like that, which I honestly think is a really bad move when you're starting a company right from the beginning, because your skill sets don't necessarily warrant giving someone else 50-50 of a business that you're making, right? But you want to bring someone on right away because it just gives you like validation, So that was really tough at the beginning. Yeah, man, once it started moving, it was just exciting. It's just like fun to build something and just see it succeed,
I think that's so frequently the mistake that we make as entrepreneurs, is that we have this emotion that we're solving for, and then we build this pseudo logical case that's this straw house that doesn't actually have a foundation, but we say we need this skill set and this skill set, and therefore we got to reach out to this person and give this portion of the company away because we're trying to solve for a feeling.
That's right.
And I don't know if this has been your experience, but it stays lonely. Like, no matter who you surround yourself with. Like, when you're building an organization or building a company or building a business unit, doing something that's never been done, and it's you that has to do it, like, it's just a lonely process.
It is. But, I mean, it helped having you, like, we're cousins and we hang out quite frequently. Like, it helped having you in my life. My brother-in-law, also very entrepreneurial. And so, like, we'd hang out with both you guys a lot, and that helped a ton. Because it just, like, helped reaffirm, like, hey, I'm going in the right direction. Honestly, like, talking with you, talking with my brother-in-law, that's kind of what helped push me to leave Space Station. Was just, like, just having other people like, dude, you could do this. Like, you could make this happen. And, like, that, I don't know, that helps just give you the confidence to do something like that,
I think there's entrepreneurs that are in every single business, and I think Space Station could have turned this in. It was a lose for them and a win for you. They could have turned it into a win for you and a win for them. Yeah. What can business owners do to create wins for their entrepreneurial employees?
You just have to, there's two things. I think your vision, and Hormozy talks about this a lot. I quote him a ton, but he talks about you have to make your vision big enough that other people's visions can fit inside of it. If you're not dreaming big enough or you don't have a big enough vision, like, and people eventually just hit this point where it's like, where am I going with my life? Like, there's nothing for me here. There's no more growth for me here. So why would I stay, And not everyone's like that. Like, I know there's a lot of people that become very content and like, hey, I have a good salary. Like, work's not everything for me, like, but that wasn't me. I feel like businesses, if you have A players, like, you need to make sure their interests are completely aligned with your interests. Like, you need to make sure they're incentivized, and just keep them happy, because, I mean, Hormozy talks about this too, and I'm going to quote him a ton throughout this thing, but he talks about how A players will produce 5 times more than like a B player. And sometimes you're only paying them 2 times more than the B player or whatever, right?
Or sometimes the same, right?
Or sometimes the same.
Yeah.
So it's just important. You want to make sure that their interests are aligned. And if they're wanting to be a part of that company in a way, like, figure out a way to make it happen. Because it's hard to replace those guys.
What does that mean? That means equity or bonuses or involve you in the conversations of where should we go as a company?
I think it's just
strategy, culture creation.
I think a lot of it's just like being able to read people and know what motivates them. Because for some people, it's not money. Like, some people, it's like, hey, I want to build this thing. I want to feel like I'm a part of this community. Maybe that's through giving them equity. Maybe that's through including them in, like, conversations about growing the business. I think there's a lot of different ways that can go.
Cool. Dude, that's an amazing story, and it's so cool where you're at with Legends and what you guys are building and the influencers and the brands that you guys are working with.
Thanks.
So thanks for sharing the story.
Of course.
Can you talk us through some of the basics on how businesses can grow their businesses through influencer marketing? Because it is so new.
Yeah. So I've had a few conversations like this now with people that are kind of just starting out with business. There's, like, different stages, I would say, in, like, the business cycle where influencer marketing can be good and where it could be, like, really bad for your company. So if you're in, like, kind of that startup stage, I would not go out and start allocating a ton of budget to influencer marketing. Just inherently, influencer marketing is extremely risky. There's just so many factors that go into it. Like, the influencer has to be a really good fit with your brand. Like, their brand and your brand, they have to mesh together really well, or else it's just going to come off as like an ad read, and a lot of people skip through those. Like, it just doesn't perform as well. And so when you're starting off and you're, just starting to grow your startup or whatever, I feel like the best thing you can do is start to develop an affiliate marketing type program where, depending on what your product is, you're giving a percentage of of sales to an influencer, and you can start to make it somewhat exclusive, your affiliate marketing program, but start to bring influencers in there where they're incentivized to sell your product without payment. On those types of programs, you're mostly going to pick up smaller influencers. Like right now, the influencers I work with, we never do only affiliate type models. Like, that's just just don't do that because we have so many brands coming to us that are willing to pay upfront. And like the way I see it is kind of on this scale. On one side, you have affiliate marketing. On the other side, you have paid upfront. And on the affiliate marketing, all the risk is on the influencer because it's like I have to make all this content. I have to do everything, and then I'm posting it, and I'm just hoping that it performs. But if it does, like, then I make some money. But, I mean, there is zero risk to the brand on the affiliate side. And that's why I think it's so good for startups to do that because they have no risk. It's like, dude, the influencer blows up for you. You get all these sales. Yeah, they get a cut of it, but they've brought on all these new customers for you. The other side of that is just the paid up front, right? The paid up front side, that is all the risk is on the brand. And that's why for sure as a startup, you should try and avoid that if you can, because all the risk is on that side. And if it performs well, that's awesome. You got to keep all the, you got to keep all the earnings from that. There's no affiliate with the influencer. But if it doesn't, and maybe they don't get as many views or whatever, and it just doesn't mesh with their audience, like you're kind of sitting there holding the bag because, you paid $10K for this thing and you got $2K of sales, right? So what we try to do sometimes is just meet in the middle where it's like a hybrid type thing where we do upfront payment, but there's also affiliate commission as well. And that works well for a lot of brands. But so yeah, back to it. Startup, I would make an affiliate program. I would start to bring on, a lot of influencers into that program and see which influencers are performing for you. If you have a specific niche of influencer that's crushing for you, say you're selling, I don't know, what would be a good product to sell? Let's see.
Selling a Robinhood competitor.
Perfect.
Like Robinhood
Yep,
app.
Robinhood competitor. That's great. So say that's your product, right? And you have found, okay, we have all these different influencers that are promoting it, and this guy that talks about side hustles posted about us one time, and he got a crazy amount of sales for us. I would start to just try and pick up more people from that niche to post, try and get them as affiliates. But then that would probably be the time, if you see that keeps performing well, that would be the time where I'd like start to invest a little bit of money there and keep testing with those guys and see if that niche keeps performing for you. I'm not saying go in and throw in, 10, 20, 30K on some of these influencers, but there's a lot of smaller guys that maybe only have, 50,000 subscribers or less, and you can get them to at a pretty reasonable rate to post about you, and they have a pretty cult following for the most part. So that's kind of the direction I would go. The brands that we work with mostly are kind of on the spectrum. They're in this like middle part where their brand isn't super well known, but they've made a ton of money. And so they're able to afford a lot of these upfront fees for influencers. I'm not talking like a Coca-Cola or a Nike. Like those guys already have such crazy brand awareness that like they really don't need to work with influencers unless they're doing some sort of like collab with some huge influencer, then it makes sense. But I'm talking more like Athletic Greens is a really good example. We work a lot. We do some stuff with Athletic Greens where they've done an excellent job with influencer marketing. They've sponsored a ton of different influencers, and they're not like a household name, I would say, but they're almost there, but they've made a good amount of money. So they're able to invest that and purchase some of these higher or these bigger influencers that can produce a massive ROI. But if it doesn't, they're not like sunk, So
There's always this concept in business of buy versus build.
Sure.
When you're talking about influencer marketing, is it worth it for a brand to try and build their own influencer internally, like their own Instagram page, versus just spending a little bit of money and going with someone who has already built the following? Like how?
I think there's huge value there. That was another thing I actually wanted to bring up was if you are a startup company and you're getting a new product going, I think it is good to just look around and be like, what influencer would fit really well with us? Because a lot of the time you're going to be able to, like, for example, I ran a massive campaign for Built Bar when I was at Space Station. And one of the first girls that I brought on who had a YouTube channel, she ended up being our highest performer by far because her audience just fit so well with it. She loved the product. She was happy to she would like post about it organically all the time. Like she was money. And so it was like, that was one of the first people we tested tons of influencers with Built Bar. There was a period of 3 months where we did hundreds of influencers posting for them on YouTube. and this girl was still like the top performer. So it was like, there's a lot of times where it's like, if you can find someone like that, and maybe early on, if you're willing to offer equity or something like that, and they've already built a massive following, then it's worth it. But I think it's, anyways.
It takes years to build a brand.
It takes a ton of time. And building an audience as a brand is like really tough. It's really, really tough. Like, I don't know about you guys, but I don't really follow like a ton of brands or like consume a lot of content
just
from
Taco
brands.
Bells.
Taco Bells.
Twitter.
That's right. So, I mean, I think you should try to. I think you should build a brand. But I think the fastest way to do that is associating your brand with an influencer, in my opinion.
People just like people at the end of the day,
yeah,
right?
Totally.
I had a question for you. You said earlier on, I have actually two questions from things that you said. But one of them, you talked about the brand mashing with the influencer.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Is the audience, the values? Can you tell us a little bit more about?
Audience, values, interests, those types of things. And it's like, you can get really granular with it. Like on YouTube, you can see demographics. So you can be like, where do they live? Do they live in the US? Is it male or female? What are the age groups? Like YouTube breaks it down a ton where it's like, 18 below and like 25 and 35, and it goes all the way up, and it can show the percentages that you have of each one of those things. But I think it's like more than that. One brand that we just worked with, I also represent my wife just for, that. Her name's Jane. And we just did a brand campaign with Cafe Rio, which was awesome. I love Cafe Rio. Jane's a huge fan of Cafe Rio. And so when they came to us to work together, we were like so hyped. And Jane works with a bunch of other brands, and we like a lot of those. We like those brands. Like we honestly don't promote brands that we don't like. And I know earlier on with influencers, it's really easy to just kind of take that cash and like, even if you don't like the product, and like talk about it. But that was just something we just never really did that, because we were just like, yeah, we're just going to talk about the things that we love. And so we have a few partners that we're really consistent with. But then Cafe Rio came on. And with Cafe Rio, it just felt like it was such a perfect fit for some reason. Like, it's hard to explain. Like, it just felt like we love the product. We love kind of the culture and vibe that they have. It felt like it was such a really good, like such a solid fit with her. And so that was kind of one example of like, there was just a brand that meshed super well. But yeah, it's hard to, I wish I could articulate like how you find that with a brand and an influencer, but once you can, it's like straight up magic, dude. Like, that's what happened with Built Bar and this girl that we had on YouTube. Like, it just meshed so well, and it performed so well. So
there are some tangibles like the metrics, the YouTube, the demographics, but there are some intangibles that you just like, you consume that product, you're passionate about it.
Yeah. And you can just like kind of tell this vibe from an influencer, and if that brand has a similar vibe, it's just like, yeah, those would, like, you'd look at them and you're like, yeah, those would go well together, I think a lot of people, it's just hard to like get granular with that and be like, yeah, this is exactly the influencer that would work with this brand or not. But sometimes you can just like feel it,
I feel like it's like core values with a business. You're like, oh, we have aspirational core values of this is what we want to turn into or what we want to be. And it's not, don't pick core values that you want your company to be. Pick the core values that you actually are.
Yep.
I was going to say about culture as well. So hard to get granular with that, but you just know when it's a cultural fit.
Yeah, that's right.
I was going to ask you another question. Let's say I'm a sales leader. I'm trying to invest in marketing, and I don't know who the influencers are for my ideal customer profile. Do I spend the time finding those people, or are there affiliate programs that I can go to that will find those people for me?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say you definitely, with any brand, you want to know what your target audience is. And so you should know kind of what their interests are or who they are, gender, like age group, where they live, all that stuff like we were mentioning. And so I think from those type of things, you can almost just like look at a certain influencer like, yeah, this person fits with us, right? But yeah, there are affiliate agencies out there that help you build out those types of things. I've known a few, but they weren't great. They just didn't do a super good job. And so, yeah, there are some out there, but for the most part, I think as brand owner, as a business owner, you should know who your target audience is, and you should try and, at least kind of know who those influencers would be, or have someone on your team that would be willing to go out and try and find those people.
Yeah, I don't think you can. Well, I know you're not saying this. As you're talking, I was like, yeah, you can't outsource figuring out the problem that you solve as a business and who your ideal customer profile is and what your unique value proposition is.
But it does take a lot of time, like hunting down those influencers, man. Like that does take a ton of time. So I know there are agencies out there that are like affiliate only, and they help.
They will find those.
Yeah, they'll help you do that. But like I said, the ones that I've come across, they haven't been great.
We were talking about this for Aspen. So Aspen is a business to business. We're a business and we sell to banks. So we work with a few hundred banks in the world, all the way up from like the Wells Fargo's, Bank of America, John Deere Financial, all the way down to small little local banks and alternative finance companies who are lenders but wouldn't be considered a traditional bank, and everything in between. And there's probably 10,000 people total in the world that would buy our product, do you think? That is like that the champions at these banks that are actually going to be the decision maker. There's a set number. It's not a massive market. And we're selling to businesses. Do you feel like there's a play for influencer marketing in all businesses? And like that includes Aspen, or it's like, hey, it's a really good fit for consumer packaged goods, but not so much of a fit for these types of businesses? Yeah,
no, that's a great question, dude. I think for sure D2C influencer marketing's a great way to go. Personally, I'd probably start trying to max out like paid ads and a few other avenues before like paying upfront on influencers. But like affiliate marketing, D2C for sure, you have to have that. But yeah, B2B, dude, this is a business that is tough, man. Like because I wouldn't even know where to start on that. For you guys, like who are we trying to reach, and you said there's like maybe 10,000 people. It'd be so hard. Like you could try and take a guess and be like, I'd assume, most of these guys that we're trying to reach would follow this specific type of influencer. Like Hormozy honestly would be a good one, because I'm sure there's a ton of business owners that follow Hormozy. So it's like, okay, let's try and get, a sponsorship on there.
We would need a business unit leader in equipment finance at a mid-sized bank.
So niche, dude. Yeah. So niche. So yeah, I don't know. That would be a tough one. From my experience, we've had B2B type companies try and come out and do stuff, and I haven't seen it work as well. For sure, direct to consumer though, you can get influencer all day. You just got to figure out the right one and the right niche on that. So.
Chris, you did mention earlier about that it is a risk for a company, and then that's where you started talking about startup, and then you would invest in the affiliate. You did say that it is a risk to invest in an influencer.
It is.
I would love to sit and listen to a negotiation between you and a brand. Can you what do you tell them? Like, can you walk us maybe a little through a scenario where how do you convince them? Like, that's not so much of a bet, more of an investment.
For me, it's nice because with Legends Marketing, like I said, we're in the finance and self-development space. And for the most part, those guys convert extremely well. Like they have a higher RPM on YouTube.
What's RPM?
So RPM is like how much they're getting paid per 1,000 views. So there's AdSense on YouTube. When you post a video on there, you can choose to have ads on there or not. And then YouTube assigns you an RPM, which allows you, like that's how much you get paid every 1,000 people that watch your video, like because there's ads on it or whatever, right? So that varies per channel. And what I've found is for the most part, finance, self-development, they have a higher RPM just because they convert better. Now that being said, in the influencer marketing game, that doesn't really matter as much because it's kind of different. But for the most part, they convert extremely well. So when a brand reaches out to one of my guys, it's like, hey, we want to work with you this month. It's like, sweet, man, we'd love to work with you. Here's his rate. We are completely booked this month. So like we could do something with you in May or maybe June. Would love to make something happen there. And if they come back and they're like, okay, like, 15K is too much. Maybe we could do 12K. It's like, sorry, man, like it wouldn't make sense for us to do 15. But it's like, and you go back and look at his channel, like we have all these guys that are coming back, like most of his sponsors are coming back like 80% of the time and they're sponsoring him every month. So it's like, obviously he's converting. So a lot of brands too will come in and they'll be like, okay, well, can you like share conversion data with us? And for me on that, I'm just like, brands usually don't share that with us, which is smart. If you're a brand, you probably shouldn't be sharing your conversion data with the influencer unless you're doing like an affiliate thing, because you have to at that point. But say you're an influencer and I pay you $2K to talk about my product and you make me $20K.
It's telling your margins to the purchaser.
Exactly.
And they say, well, you're making $15 on me.
Exactly.
I only want you to make 12.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So like, Court, you made me 20 grand and you're like, sick, dude. And hey, do you want to work together again? Yeah, man, but my rate's, 15K this time. And you'll pay it because I made you 20. It's like, okay. So brands usually will keep those numbers pretty close to the chest. And so the way that I know that a brand has like performed well with an influencer is a lot of times we'll do one video with a brand. They'll come back and like, hey, we loved working with you. We want to book you for a 6-video deal. And I'll be like, cool. Our rate is now this much. And it usually just depends. Like the more months they want to work and book your guy long term, you know that he just crushed for him.
And I could see both sides of saying, okay, since you're booking this group package of 6, we'll give you this rate. But on the same token, if it's over a 6-month period of time or for a whole year, that influencer is likely going to grow. So how do you?
So yeah, you bring up an awesome point, dude. So most brands, they're going to come to you with package deals like that and be like, hey, your influencer's rate usually is 15K. We will do 12K per video, but we want to book you for 6 videos. Dude, that's literally how it is in the industry, where they just think if they're going to book you long term, like you need to take like a discount on your rate. For me, it's the opposite, man. I'm like, hey, if my influencer's rate's 15K, if you want to book him for 6 months, his rate's 18K. Because in 6 months from now, he's probably going to have grown, 30,000 followers, 50,000 followers, and his rate is going to be around 18K at that time. And I know that he crushed for you because you're coming back for a 6-video deal. And so that might be unique to the finance side of things, because like it's nice. The negotiating spot I'm in is nice because we have so much brand demand coming in that I can just kind of be like, I don't care. Like this is his rate. If you want to work with him, this is it. And it just works that way. It's not a lot of like back and forth,
Does that mean that there's space for new influencers? I mean, you have a supply and demand curve right
it's
there.
It's growing like crazy. And this industry is so new. Like I anticipate it just exploding. Yeah, it's going to just keep growing. Man, like we find new influencers every day. Like this one guy I work with is crushing it in the finance space. He started his channel a year and a half ago. A year and a half, dude. And there's other guys in the finance space that have been in there for 5-7 years and they're still doing great. But like there's new guys that come all the time. And I think just to address that a little bit, I've had some deep combos with him, and because originally he was trying to do more like personal finance type content because he watched other guys that were doing that and he looked up to them a lot and was like, I want to make content just like them. But he found is like, if you want to kind of explode with content, you need to take something that you like and just have kind of your own unique spin on it. And that's how you can grow really quick. And that's what he did. And he got really into this like side hustle niche. And from there, his channel just exploded, because the problem is like, and if you have someone who's been doing it for 7 years, everyone knows that guy's face. And so they're going to trust him to some degree when it comes to personal finance. You may be saying the same things as that guy, but no one's going to, they don't have that same trust for you. Like Hormozy talks about that all the time too, where it's like a teacher in high school could be telling you the same thing as Warren Buffett with investing, but you're going to instantly believe Warren Buffett because he has the proof from the work that he's done to like trust and believe him, compared to your teacher where you're like, well, I don't know if I trust you, man, because like you're still teaching school here instead of, making millions and investing or whatever, right? So, yeah, when it comes to content, do something that you love, but then have like your own unique spin on it. And that's the way I think you can grow really quick.
I have one last question, but Carlos, anything you want to ask before I wrap?
I do have one more question. I think this is interview set 18, 19, 17 maybe. I think we've had only a handful of people that I've seen talking with this much excitement that you have about their business.
Oh yeah.
It's which I always say this, but I just know that it is a successful business. It's going to be so much more successful because your eyes are like shining when you're talking about
I love
what
man.
you do, right?
Yeah.
What's the What's the end goal? What's your goal, long-term goal for Legends marketing?
I have a couple thoughts. I want to keep growing the agency for sure. We've brought in a few guys now and started training them up, and that's been a lot of fun and a new adventure, and they've been successful, which has been great. My ultimate goal, and where I see a lot of the industry going, you've seen this with like Logan Paul and Prime, but I think starting a D2C type company with an influencer from the get-go, I think that could be massive, especially from my positioning right now, where it's like I can see which influencers that I work with perform extremely well with brands. Starting a company with them, having someone that can come in and be like, yeah, we know how to get the manufacturing set up, we know how to get the company set up, we know how to get the accounting rolling, knowing all of those things and coming to an influencer, because like at the end of the day, an influencer's biggest fear is at some point they're going to become irrelevant and they won't be able to like support themselves anymore. But if you can use that push that you have as an influencer right now and start to build a company and have a brand, your own brand associated with it from the beginning, it's kind of just like a spark plug at the start of a company to get it going right off the ground, because you've already built this massive audience. But then eventually that company can become self-sufficient. And that's kind of what I want to do at some point. And we're working on a few things right now where I'm trying to learn direct to consumer type stuff, which isn't easy. It's kind of a new industry for me. But yeah, there's kind of a mixture of that, and then also continue to grow Legends marketing, just because like I said, I think this industry is going to keep just exploding. So
I love it.
All right, Chris, last question for you. Thinking back that you in the present get to have a conversation with a prior version of yourself. So maybe that's in the summer you're doing door-to-door sales, or while you're at KPMG during busy season, or when you're in the mix of things, leaving KPMG or leaving the space station to start. Can you pick one of those times and just share some advice that you would have shared with your prior version of yourself?
I don't think I would have gone back and like said anything like, don't go get your master's degree because you don't use it at all now. Like I don't think it would have been anything like that. I'm just like happy where I ended up. So I don't think I would have changed anything, but for someone else who's growing up, like trying to figure out like what they want to do, my advice would be, just go figure out like what industry you want to be in and go start working at a low level of whatever company is in that industry that you feel like you vibe really well with, or is something that you could be very passionate about, and start to look for the other people that are high up in that company. And if they have the life that you want to have, then like you're in the right spot, and try and figure out what it takes to have that type of job. I think a lot of us, I was raised where it's like, you got to go to school, you got to get a college education, you got to get, your master's degree, all this stuff. And like, that's going to set you up right. And obviously my dad's a dentist. Like that's what he did. He went to dental school, did all that stuff. And he's been a dentist his entire life. And it's been great. It's been honestly really good for him. And it worked out great for him. But I feel like times are changing a lot. I don't know if school is as good as it used to be back in the day. And like, I think this method of finding the industry you want to be in, and maybe it ends up that you do need schooling. Like, hey, actually, I wanted to go into accounting. I went and tried to do something at KPMG. It's like, hey, in order to be a partner there, you have to go get a master's degree. Or maybe you end up wanting to be a lawyer. You got to go get a law degree, whatever. But I think first it's better to go work somewhere and just like see the environment of it first. And then or not if you need to go do schooling, instead of going and doing schooling and then, trying to figure it out from there. So.
Chris, you're a beast, dude. Love you, bro. Thanks for taking the time to be on the podcast.
Yeah, dude. Thanks for having me. It was fun.
It was awesome. Thanks, man.
Yeah.
You've been watching Hello Grow, the world's #1 growth podcast. I'm Cortland Brady.
I'm Carlos Souza. If you've watched this video so far, it means that you like the content that we're putting out and the people we're interviewing.
We're putting together a community of business leaders, entrepreneurs, and sales leaders. You liking, subscribing, and sharing this content helps us reach those that are going on that journey.
If you want to be a part of this community, please subscribe, smash that like button, and turn on those notifications.